On. There we go. Now the people can actually hear me. Again, good evening, everyone out there. Good evening. Oh, we ain't done this in a while. It's been about been about a month. Actually, it's been over a month. It was September the 11th last time we actually did a reading. Or not September, the month before September, August 11th. But here we are back again. We're going to try to, for all y'all out there that didn't come in here, y'all going to miss it. Y'all missed the food we had, which was really good. uh, we left off, last time we left off, Elisha in 2 Kings chapter 3 had just told the three kings of Israel that had came together that they could go ahead and go up and fight the Moabites, and that God would allow them to win the battle. And they did just that. Seems like so far God is showing Israel at this point that even though Elijah is gone, Elijah had just been taken up in a whirlwind to heaven, and Elisha had taken over where Elijah was. And even though Elijah was gone, God is not gone. He was going to be there with Israel, and that he was going to be with Elisha. Which brings us to chapter 4. And that's where we're going to be picking back up tonight. So we're going to be in 2 Kings. For y'all that may have forgotten over a month of time where we were, 2 Kings chapter 4 and verse 1, which is basically a collection of miracles that God does through Elijah or Elisha. I got to get that straight. Elijah's gone. Through Elisha, showing Israel that he's not left them. And so as we pick up here in verse 1 of 2 Kings chapter 4, like I say, this is going to be kind of a collection of miracles, because you're just going to move from one miracle to the next miracle to the next miracle. And I personally believe that God is showing them that I've not left you. Elijah may be gone, but I'm still here. And so we're going to pick up here. Like I say, it's going to move through a lot of different things at once. And you're going to go, what in the world's going on, right? And it's just God showing him that he's still with him. So 2 Kings chapter 4 and verse 1, it says, a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, your servant, my husband, is dead. Probably, why do you think she said this? When Elisha comes back into town, this woman runs up to him and says, your servant, my husband, is dead. Why do you think she might have said this to him? I would say that probably, you got to remember, the war had just finished. And I think she's literally telling him, since you're the one that told everybody that they could go out and go to war, this is why my husband is dead, right? So she's kind of blaming Elisha. This is why you're the reason that my husband is dead, okay? And she says, and you know that your servant feared the Lord, and the creditor is coming to take my two sons to be his slaves. Creditor ever knocked on your door, Gary? I know, right? I used just a crazy, weird story. I had a Great Dane long, many, many moons ago, way before I even met Tracy, right? And I had not paid my electric bill. I just didn't have the money, right? And so the guy came out to shut my electric off, and I opened the back door, and I let the Great Dane out. My Great Dane, that Great Dane wasn't very nice. She was actually pretty rotten, and she chased him all the way back to his truck. He got into his truck and he left. And I went out and got in my car and went down and paid the electric bill. Like they're not going to turn it off, right? Anyway, y'all know what it means when the creditor comes knocking on your door. And so she's worried, right? She's like, my husband's dead. The creditor is coming to take my sons to be his slaves. Basically, she's blaming Elisha for what's happening to her, right? And she's wanting to know what Elisha is going to do about it. Verse 2. So Elisha said to her, what shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house? And she said, your maidservant has nothing in the house but a jar of oil. Then he said, go borrow vessels from everywhere, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. And here's the key, okay? In other words, what's he saying? He's saying, do you trust God? Right? Do you trust God? He's like, don't go out and just get one or two vessels. Get as many as you possibly can. He says, but do not gather just a few. And when you have come in, you shall shut the door behind you and your sons. In other words, don't let nobody else know what you're doing, right? And he says, then I want you to pour this oil that you have into all those vessels and set aside the full ones. So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured it out. Now it came to pass, when the vessels were full, that she said to her son, bring me another vessel. And he said to her, there is not another vessel. I don't have any more, Mom. I'm done. They're all gone. We've used them all, right? And so the oil ceased. Isn't God amazing how he takes it right up to where you trust him? Where it's done, where you don't have any more to fill, right? And he stopped. Now, if they would have went and just grabbed two, let's say they had 50 vessels here and they filled all 50. If they would have just went and grabbed two and brought them back, God would have gave them as much as they trusted him. And at the end of filling those two, the oil would have stopped. And so the point of that whole miracle is trusting God. When he says, do something, do it all the way. Do it to the best that you possibly can. Verse 7, then she came and told the man of God, and he said, go sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons live on the rest. Now it happened one day. That was one miracle, okay? It says, now it happened one day that Elisha went to Shunem, where there was a notable woman, and she persuaded him to eat some food. So it was, as often as he passed by, he would turn in there to eat some food. He'd been walking, going from town to town, doing Elisha things, for the Lord. And as he passed by this one house, he always went in and got something to eat, because he knew she was going to have something to eat for him, right? And she said to her husband, look now, I know that this is a holy man of God who passes by us regularly. Please let us make a small upper room on the wall. Let us put a bed for him there, and a table and a chair and a lampstand. Let's kind of try to make him feel comfortable when he comes in to eat next time. So it will be whenever he comes to us, he can turn in there. And it happened one day that he came there and he turned into the upper room and lay down there. So he came in that next time to eat, and much to his surprise, he had a mother-in-law suite made just for him, right? It says, then he said to Gaza, his servant, call this Shunammite woman. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said to him, and this kind of confuses me, because you've got the woman standing in front of you, why are you talking to to your slave man to Gaza? Why don't you talk directly to the woman that's standing? Anyway, he says, and he said to him, say now to her, look, you have been concerned for us with all this care. What can I do for you? Do you want me to speak on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army? And she answered, I dwell among my own people. In other words, I don't need your help to go to the king. I'm fine where I'm at, right? I'm perfectly fine. So he said, what then is to be done for her? And Giza answered, actually, she has no son, and her husband is old. So he said to her, or he said, call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the doorway. Then he said, about this time next year, you shall embrace a son. And she said, no, my lord, man of God, do not lie to your maidservant. He's telling her you're going to be pregnant, right? And she's like, no, there's no way. Don't lie to me. Don't tell me something that ain't going to happen. It says, but the woman conceived and bore a son when the appointed time had come of which Elisha had told her. And the child grew. Now it happened one day that he went out to his father to the reapers, and he said to his father, my head, my head. And so he said to a servant, carry him to his mother. When he had taken him and brought him to his mother, he sat on her knees till noon and then died. So Elisha tells this woman she's going to be a mother after she's wanted to be a mother her whole life. And then just shortly after her son begins to grow, he dies on her. And so she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, shut the door upon him, and went out. Then she called to her husband and said, please send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys that I may run to the man of God and come back. So he said, why are you going to him today? It is neither the new moon nor the Sabbath. Why are you going to church, woman? It's not time for church, right? And she said, it is well. Then she saddled a donkey and said to her servant, drive and go forward. Do not slacken the pace for me unless I tell you. And so she departed and went to the man of God at Mount Carmel. So it was when the man of God saw her afar off that he said to his servant Gehazi, look, the Shunammite woman, please run now to meet her and say to her, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child? And she answered, it is well. Why would she say that? She's telling the servant that it is well. Everything's fine when it's not. It's clearly not fine. Her son just died, right? I think she's trying to get close to Elisha. She didn't want the servant to get in the way. And so verse 27 says, now when she came to the man of God, she caught him by his feet, but Gaza came near to push her away. But the man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. So she said, did I ask a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, get yourself ready and take my staff in your hand and be on your way. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. And if anyone greets you, do not answer him, but lay my staff on the face of the child. And the mother of the child said, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So he arose and followed her. Now Gehazi went on ahead of them and laid the staff on the child's face, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Therefore he went back to meet him and told him, saying, the child has not awakened. When Elisha came into the house, there was the child lying dead on his bed. He went in, therefore, shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. And he went up and lay on the child and put his mouth on his mouth and his eyes on his eyes and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. He returned and walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and stretched himself out on him. And the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. And he called Gehazi and said, call this Shunammite woman. So he called her, and when she came in to him, he said, pick up your son. So she went in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she picked up her son and went out. And Elisha returned to Gilgal, and there was a famine in the land. So there's, miracle number 2 and miracle number 3, right? He had the woman had the child, and the woman lost the child, and then he brought him back. Verse 38, and Elisha returned to Gilgal, and there was a famine in the land. Now the sons of the prophets were sitting before him, and he said to his servant, put on the large pot and boil stew for the sons of the prophets. So one went out into the field to gather herbs and found a wild vine. Gary, we all know we shouldn't put wild vines in our stew, right? It could be a little dangerous, depending on what that might be. And gathered from it a lapful of wild gourds, and came and sliced them into a pot of stew, though they did not know what they were. Then they served it to the men to eat. Now it happened as they were eating the stew that they cried out and said, man of God, there is death in the pot. And they could not eat it. So he said, then bring some flour. And he put it into the pot and said, serve it to the people that they may eat. And there was nothing harmful in the pot. There's another miracle, right? You can see it's just kind of like, it's not really something that's like a teaching lesson. It's basically Elijah that had everyone has followed, right? And everyone knew was a man of God. He's now gone. And God is pointing out through all these little things that I've not left. I'm still here, right? Then a man came from Shelisha, wherever that is, and brought the man of God bread of the first fruits, 20 loaves of barley bread, and newly ripened grain in his knapsack. And he said, give it to the people that they may eat. But his servant said, what? Shall I set before 100 men? In other words, I don't think this is enough, right? He said again, give it to the people that they may eat. For thus says the Lord, they shall eat and have some left over. And y'all thought that the breaking of the bread and fish was the first time that happened. Not at all. This one here happened a long time before that. In fact, this one here happened before it even, was a thing, right? So he set it before them, and they ate. And guess what? They definitely had some left over, according to the word of the Lord. So there was another miracle. So now we've witnessed a couple miracles, right, that were done through Elijah as we move on to chapter 5. And this is actually the chapter that we're supposed to be in. So it says, chapter 5, verse 1. Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Syria, was a great and honorable man in the eyes of his master, because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was also a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out on raids and had brought back captive a young girl from the land of Israel. She waited on Naaman's wife. Then she said to her mistress, if only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, for he would heal him of his leprosy. So all those little miracles and all those little things that we were just reading through began to put Elisha's name out among the people that, you know what? There is a man of God that can do mighty, wonderful miracles in God's name. And so this man who is a leper, right? They said, you know what? If only, and that's who they were talking about. If only my master were with the prophet, was with Elisha, who is in Samaria, he would heal him of this leprosy. That's what he's talking about. Verse 4, and it says, and Naaman went in and told his master, saying, thus and thus said the girl, who is from the land of Israel. He's saying, Israel, there's a God in Israel that can heal me, right? Then the king of Syria said, go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So he departed and took with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. Now, it might not mean a lot to y'all, but that's a whole lot of stuff, right? This very, very, very snooty, if you ask me. They're coming in trying to buy this healing. Okay, it says in verse 6, then he brought the letter to the king of Israel, which said, now be advised, when this letter comes to you, that I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, that you may heal him of leprosy. So these people thought that if they send the leper to the king could do it, right? Because he's the king of Israel, right? And so it says, verse 7, and it happened when the king of Israel read this letter that he tore his clothes and said, am I a god? Am I God to kill and make alive, that this man sends a man to me to heal him of his leprosy? Right? He's like, who am I? I can't heal him, right? Therefore, please consider and see how he seeks a quarrel with me. So the king of Israel is thinking that this other king, right, is sending this over here trying to start a fight with him and go back to war, right? So he's trying to start a war with me because he wants me to heal his servant, and I can't heal his servant. Why is he sending him to me, right? Verse 8, so it was when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent to the king saying, why have you torn your clothes? Please let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. In other words, Elisha is like, what's going on, king? Don't get down. Send him to me. I'll take care of your problem. Verse 9, then Naaman went with his horses and chariot, and he stood at the door of Elisha's house. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored to you, and you shall be clean. Sounds pretty reasonable. Sounds like, hey, okay, go down, take a bath in the Jordan River, and I'll be okay, right? Here's the problem. Jordan River was probably one of the nastiest rivers in the entire country. It's kind of like telling you to go down to the sewer plant and wash off in the sewage. It's basically what he was saying, okay? And so Naaman, he's not liking what he's hearing. He's like, why can't I go somewhere else and wash, right? Verse 11 says, but Naaman became furious and went away and said, indeed, I said to myself, he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and heal the leprosy. He was expecting a circus sideshow, right? Surely he'll come out and go, you'll be healed, and that's what he was expecting. And verse 12 says, are not the Abaniah and the whatever those are, right? The rivers of Damascus better than all the waters of Israel? In other words, I want to go down and wash off in the clean water, not the filthy stuff. He says, could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in rage. He was angry that the guy didn't come out and just do some kind of hocus pocus and make him all well. And on top of that, he told him to go down and wash off in the sewage water, right? Verse 13, and his servants came near and spoke to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, if he had came out and did some kind of crazy, wild magic act, right? He says, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, wash and be clean? He's like, dude, all he's telling you to do is go down and wash off in the Jordan. What's it going to hurt? Right? So he went down and dipped 7 times in the Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Man, it worked, right? No hocus pocus, no, you're all good. Verse 15, and he returned to the man of God, he and all his aides, and came and stood before him. And he said, indeed, now I know there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Now, therefore, please take a gift from your servant. In other words, there he was trying to buy off, this healing. Verse 16, but he said, as the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will receive nothing. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. He said, look, I didn't do this. It wasn't because of me. It was all because of God. I'm not going to take your money. I'm not going to take your things. So go ahead. So Naaman, this is the guy with the leprosy, said, then if not, please let your servant be given 2 mule loads of earth. He wants some earth to take back with him, right? He's like, remember what he said? There is no God anywhere else except in Israel. And so he's like, give me some dirt from Israel, is what he's wanting, right? For your servant will no longer offer either burnt offerings or sacrifices to other gods, but to the Lord. And the reason he wanted to do this is because he was going home to the king, right, of the other country. I can't remember right off the top of my head what country that was. But anyway, he was going home to this king, and that king was going to be worshiping other idols. They didn't worship God. And so what he had in his mind is he's going to take this earth from Israel back to his home, and where he was going to kneel down and be praying to this other God, he was actually going to have God, with him on that earth spot, and he wasn't going to have to, he was going to fake it. He was going to fake worshiping the God of his king and worship the God of Israel. And so it says, for your servant will no longer offer either burnt offering or sacrifice to other gods, but to the Lord. Yet in this thing, may the Lord pardon your servant. In other words, you're going to see me bowing down to these idols, but I'm really bowing down to God. It says, when my master goes into the temple of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, or he makes me bow down to Rimmon, right? And I bow down in the temple of Rimmon. When I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord please pardon your servant in this thing. He's like, I have to do what my master tells me to do, but I'm really gonna be praising God for what he's done for me. Verse 19 says, then he said to him, go in peace. So he departed from him a short distance. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, look, my master has spared Naaman the Syrian, while not receiving from his hands what he brought. But as the Lord lives, I will run after him and take something from him. So he's like, this is not fair. He healed him, and he was just offering stuff to him. So I'm going to go get it, right? So Gehazi pursued Naaman. When Naaman saw him running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, is all well? What's going on? Everything okay? And he said, all is well. But my master, right, and talking about Elisha, he says, my master has sent me saying, indeed, bam, I just thought of something. I really do need something, right? Indeed, just now, 2 young men of the sons of the prophets have come to me from the mountains of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments. Just give me some clothes for these people that came to visit, right? And some silver. So Naaman said, please take 2 talents. And he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of garments, and handed them to 2 of his servants, and they carried them on ahead of him. When he came to the citadel, he took them from their hand and stored them away in the house. He was hiding them. Gaza was hiding from Elisha what he was doing, right? And he let the men go, and they departed. Now he went in and stood before his master. Elisha said to him, where did you go, Gehazi? We always get found out, don't we, Gary? Gary, why are you in the refrigerator? It's too late. You need to be in bed. Can't get away with nothing, can you? Says, where did you go, Gehazi? And he said, your servant did not go anywhere. I'm not doing anything. Right? That's what we always say. I didn't do it. Your servant did not go anywhere. Then he said to him, did not my heart go with you when the man turned back from his chariot to meet you? Is it time to receive money and to receive clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male and female servants? Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. And he went out from his presence, leprous, as white as snow. So he was trying to hide this. He was trying to take money and take things, for God's glory. All these miracles that Elisha was doing was to show the people that God was still with them and to show the people around them that God was in Israel, right? But yet his servant here got a little greedy and ended up taking on what Naaman got rid of. Chapter 6, verse 1. And the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, see now, the place where we dwell with you is too small for us. Please let us go to the Jordan and let every man take a beam from there and let us make there a place where we may dwell. So he said, go. Then one said, please consent to go with your servants. And he answered, I will go. So he went with him, and when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But as one was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water, and he cried out and said, alas, master, for it was borrowed. You don't want to lose your borrowed axe, right? I'll tell you, every time I loan something out, it never comes back working. So the man of God said, where did it fall? And he showed him the place. So he cut off a stick and threw it in there, and he made the iron float. There's another miracle. It's just, if you read this, it's literally just miracle after miracle after miracle. And it really has it seems like nothing kind of fits together to make an actual story. It's just Elisha and what's going on in his life as he's taking over Elijah's prophet status. Says, therefore he said, pick it up for yourself. So he reached out his hand and took it. Now the king of Syria was making war against Israel, and he consulted with his servants, saying, my camp will be in such and such a place. And the man of God sent to the king of Israel, saying, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are coming down there. He was giving them a warning, giving the king of Israel a warning, saying, don't do this. You got to do it like this. Don't do it like that. Then the king of Israel sent someone to the place which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him, and he was watchful there, not just once, but twice. Therefore the heart of the king of Syria was greatly troubled by this thing, and he called the servants and said to them, will you not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? And one of his servants said, none, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. Elisha knew what he was saying. He was just kind of like reading his mind, right? So he said, go and see where he is, that I may send and get him. And it was told him, saying, surely he is in Dothan. Therefore he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, alas, my master, what shall we do? I mean, they've came to take him, right? Because he's been telling the king of Israel, he's been snitching on him, right? And so they came to take him away. They were going to do whatever they were going to do with him, right? So it says, so he answered, do not fear. Doesn't matter how many people are out there coming to get me. You haven't learned by now, by seeing all the miracles that happen? I ain't worried about it. How many times do we get worried about our lives, and we're worried all the time about this and that and paying this and paying that and taking care of this thing and taking care of that thing, all this stuff that all comes down on us. When in reality, we ain't got nothing to worry about. God's got it all under control. And that's what he's telling his servant here is don't worry about it. God's got it under control. But we, like his servant, can't really see. We don't understand. So he answered, do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And his servant looks up and goes, look, dude, I don't know about you, but that's just me and you. We the only ones here, right? We're the only ones here. What are you talking about? And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. Then the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, man, if we could only get this in our minds. Behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. God is always there with his angels and with his assistants. We don't have nothing to worry about. God's taking care of us all around, no matter what we're dealing with. So when the Syrians came down to him, Elisha prayed to the Lord and said, strike this people, I pray, with blindness. And you have to see here that the horses and the chariots of fire, they didn't have to do anything, right? Elisha prayed, strike this people with blindness. And he struck them with the blindness according to the word of Elisha. Now Elisha said to them, this is not the way, nor is this the city. Follow me and I will bring you to the man who you seek. So he goes out and he's like, y'all are in the wrong place. Just trust me and I'll take you to Elisha. I will get you there. Just come on and follow. Everybody just hold hands. Single file line, right? Because they're blind. They can't see. So they have to line up and go walking down through there from following Elisha. So it was when they had come to Samaria that Elisha said, Lord, open the eyes of these men that they may see. And the Lord opened their eyes and they saw, and there they were inside Samaria, inside the camp of their enemy. They were just they just walked right in, right? I would like to have been the gatekeeper of Samaria. Could you imagine this gatekeeper as he's standing there at the top of the gate and he looks out and he sees Elisha and Elisha's servant leading the entire enemy army to their gate? What is going on, right? I mean, this had to be a sight to see. Anyway, verse 21. Now, when the king of Israel saw them, he said to Elisha, my father, shall I kill them? Shall I kill them? He was like a little kid in a candy store. He's like, let me kill him. I want to kill him. Yes, right? He was all excited. But he answered, you shall not kill them. Would you kill those whom you have taken captive? He's like, you've got them captive. They're here. Why do you want to kill them, right? So would you kill those whom you have taken captive with your sword and your bow? He says, set food and water before them that they may eat and drink and go to their master. In other words, look, they're here. They should know by now you can't defeat God, right? You can't go against God. And so what he's doing is he's like, give them food, give them water, let them go home and tell the king, right? Tell them that, you know what? We can't fight this fight. So it says, then he prepared a great feast for them. And after they ate and drank, he sent them away and they went to their master. So the band of Syrian raiders came no more to the land of Israel. I wouldn't either if you asked me. Okay, we're going to go to war with the land of Israel? Nope, not me. I remember what happened last time. I am not going to, no way. And it happened after this that Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, gathered all his army and went up and besieged Samaria. So this was, they had went in and they put up a siege mound against Samaria, against Israel. It says, and there was a great famine in Samaria. So, they've been put up for a long time. It says, and indeed they besieged it until a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver. 80 shekels of silver for a donkey's head, and 1/4 of a cab of dove droppings. Yeah, dove poo, right? For 5 shekels of silver. Then, as the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, "Help me, help my lord, O king." And he said, "If the Lord does not help you, where can I find help for you? From the threshing floor or from the winepress?" The king again, he's like, "I can't help you. What do you want me to do?" Then the king said to her, "What is troubling you?" And she answered, "This woman said to me," this is sad. I mean, this is how bad it had gotten. "This woman said to me, 'Give your son that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.'" Wow. "So we boiled my son and ate him. And I said to her on the next day, 'Give your son that we may eat him.' But she has hidden her son." This woman actually went to the king and said, "We ate my son yesterday, and she hid her son, so we can't eat him today." That was her complaint to the king. And we think we've got problems, right? Now it happened when the king heard the words of this woman that he tore his clothes. And as he passed by on the wall, the people looked, and there underneath he had sackcloth on his body. Then he said, "God do to me and more also, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, remains on him today." He vowed to kill Elisha because of what was going on in Israel. But Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. And the king sent a man ahead of him, but before the messenger came to him, he said to the elders, "Do you see how this son of a murderer has sent someone to take away my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold him fast at the door. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him?" So he's letting the people know. He's sitting in his house. He's got the elders with him. And he's like, "Look, guys, king's sending somebody to kill me." As soon as his servant comes, his master, the king of Israel, is right behind him. He says, "And while he was still talking with him, there was the messenger coming down to him. And then the king said, 'Surely this calamity is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?' Then Elisha said, 'Hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, tomorrow, about this time, a seah of fine flour shall be sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria.'" He's saying, come tomorrow, the famine will be over, and it will be reversed that fast. Everything is going to go back to even more. That's like saying that right now, if you go downtown, gas is $50 a gallon. And he's saying, you know what? Tomorrow at this time, gas is going to be a nickel. That's what he's saying. And that, I mean, that in your mind is going to, yeah, right. There's no way that's going to happen, right? And that's basically what he's telling him here. He says, "So an officer on whose hand the king leaned answered the man of God and said, 'Look, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, could this thing be?'" He's like, "I can't even believe that it would go that fast, from, all this all the way down to, a nickel account. There's no way, right? This thing can't happen." And he said, "In fact, you shall see it with your eyes, but you shall not eat of it." In other words, you're going to see it happen tomorrow, but you ain't going to eat of it. Okay? Now, there were 4 leprous men at the entrance of the gate, and they said to one another, "Why are we sitting here until we die?" These lepers are not allowed around anybody, right? They're not allowed around anybody. And so they're just sitting at the edge of the gate. And they're like, "Look, why in the world are we even sitting here? We're just going to die anyway. We're starving to death. We don't have anything. We're going to die. Why are we just sitting here? Let's go do something, right? Let's go get in some trouble. Might as well." It says, "If we say we will enter the city, the famine is in the city." So it's just as bad in there as it is out here on the gate. And he says, and we shall die there. And if we sit here, we die also. Now, therefore, come, let us surrender to the army of the Syrians. He's like, let's just go surrender. Let's give ourselves up, right, to the army. Maybe they'll keep us alive. Maybe they'll kill us. But we're going to die either way, right? Don't matter. It says, let us surrender to the army of the Syrians. If they keep us alive, we shall live. If they kill us, we're only going to die. It's where we're going to be anyway. And so they arose at twilight to go to the camp of the Syrians. And when they had come to the outskirts of the Syrian camp, to their surprise, no one was there. It was empty. Not one person there. Remember, they'd been there for a really long time. They besieged the entire city. They had camps set up all around the whole city. No food was coming in. No food was going out. It was enough. It was so bad that they were eating their own children. So they've been there for a while. And so these lepers, they go out to the camp and they're like, we're just going to give up. And by the time they get there, there's nobody there. It's like, okay, well, what's going on, right? Where's everybody at? It says, for the Lord had caused the army of the Syrians to hear the noise of chariots and the noise of horses, the noise of a great army. So they said to one another, look, the king of Israel is hired against us, the king of the Hittites and the king of the Egyptians, to attack us. In other words, there's people coming from all around. Let's go. Let's get out of here. We're going to die. It says, therefore they arose and fled at twilight and left the camp intact. Their tents, their horses, their donkeys, and they fled for their lives. And when these lepers came to the outskirts of the camp, they went into one tent and they ate and they drank. They got their fill. They got their belly full. And carried from it silver and gold and clothing. And they went and hid them. I think that's what I'd do too, probably. They say, hey, man, we're here, all this gold, all this silver, all this food. Let's eat, drink, and be merry. And then they came back and entered another tent and carried some from there also and went and hid it. And about this time, they're thinking, uh-oh, we're lepers. If the king of Israel finds out that we didn't tell them what was going on, they're going to kill us. And now our bellies are full and we're all good and we got gold and silver hidden away. Maybe we ought to do something, right? It says, then they said to one another, we are not doing right. This day is a day of good news, and we remain silent. If we wait until morning light, some punishment will come upon us. Now, therefore, come, let us go and tell the king's household. So they went and called to the gatekeepers of the city and told them, saying, we went to the Syrian camp, and surprisingly, no one was there. Not a human sound. Only horses and donkeys tied and tents intact. And the gatekeepers called out, and they told it to the king's household inside. So the king arose in the night and said to his servants, let me now tell you what the Syrians have done to us. They know that we're hungry. Therefore, they have gone out of the camp. It's a trap. They're going to trap us. They have gone out of the camp to hide themselves in the field, saying, when they come out of the city, we shall catch them alive and get into the city. And one of the servants answered and said, please, wait a minute, king. Hold on. He says, let several men take 5 of the remaining horses which are left in the city. Look, they may either become like all the multitude of Israel that are left in it, or indeed I say they may become like all the multitude of Israel left from those who are consumed. In other words, we ain't got nothing to lose. We're all going to die here if we don't at least check it out. We need to go check it out, see what's going on. So let us send them. Therefore they took 2 chariots with horses, and the king sent them in the direction of the Syrian army, saying, go and see. And they went after them to the Jordan, and indeed all the road was full of garments and weapons which the Syrians had thrown away in their haste. So the messengers returned and told the king, it is so, it's real, it's true. They really have left, right? Then the people went out and plundered the tents of the Syrians. So a seah of fine flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. In other words, we went out to the gas station up here, Gary, and guess what? Gas was only a nickel tomorrow. That's exactly what happened. It says, now the king had appointed the officer on whose hand he leaned to have charge of the gate. But the people trampled him in the gate. The guy that said, God can't do that. There's no way. And he said, remember Gary, he said, there's no way that this is going to happen. And he said, yeah, it is, but you're not going to see it, right? You'll see it, but you'll not taste it. And it says he died just as a man of God had said, who spoke when the king came down to him. So it happened just as the man of God had spoken to the king, saying, 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, and a seah of fine flour for a shekel shall be sold tomorrow about this time in the gate of Samaria. Then the officer had answered the man of God and said, now look, if the Lord would make windows in heaven, could such a thing be? And he had said, in fact, you shall see it with your eyes, but you shall not eat of it. And so it happened to him, for the people trampled him in the gate, and he died. We're going to stop there, because that's the end of our reading for that section. Next Wednesday, we're going to be reading about Jonah and the great big fish. So from now on in our reading plan, it's not going to be straight through. It's going to be bouncing, because now's the time that your different prophets come in. Okay, and so at this time in the story is when Jonah happens. And so we're going to skip to Jonah, and then we'll come back to 2 Kings, and then we'll skip to the next prophet, and then back to 2 Kings, and then to the next prophet. And so it's going to list it in kind of an order of how things happened and where things were, so you get an idea of the time frame of this period. So next week we're going to be in Jonah, I think chapters 1 through 3. Jonah's 1 through 3. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for letting us come together this evening and just read your word. Lord, your word is powerful. It is strong. It is, and it helps to keep us on track. Lord, I've really missed coming together and just reading the Bible, reading your word, reading what you have to tell us. And Lord, I just thank you for that opportunity that you give us. One of these days, possibly soon, we're not going to be able to do this in public. But Lord, I thank you for this chance and this opportunity to do it. Lord, I pray for those that are out sick. I pray for those that weren't able to come because of that, or because of other things that were going on in their lives. And Lord, I pray that you go with us this week, and that you help guide us through the rest of this week. Lord, I pray that as I put together a message for Sunday, that, Lord, you are front and center, and that you are there in each and every word. Lord, I just pray for each and every person out there, maybe watching online, the ones that are here. I pray that your grace and your mercy follow them through the rest of this week. In Jesus' name, amen.